So I'm feeling pretty good right now. And I hope everybody else is feeling pretty good too. Sound good, levels are good. Thank you. Awesome. It's always great to have somebody watching this besides me monitoring the audio. I got rid of my old setup. I wish I could have used that Behringer because it gave me the ability to use lav mics and some other cool little features, but it just destroyed my delicate little PC ecosystem here. So had to revert back to the old trusty Yeti, and eventually I'll get my setup going good again. I gotta buy. I'm looking to get a good Yamaha mixer, so I can make use of those lav mics again, and then actually have it configured in a functional way so that I could scale. If I ever have more than just me and Justin in here, I can just plug in mics and scale. But that's a problem for future Devin. I'll figure that one out later. And also Devin with money after having spent inordinate amounts of money building this computer and getting all this shit together. So it is what it is. You know, maybe I should go on strike. You know, there's an unprecedented strike wave happening across the country right now. Like everybody and their grandma seems to be up on this revitalized labor movement. Honestly, it's not just the strike wave. Whenever you watch anything on TV in respects to our labor shortage or our supply chain issues, it's always about, you know, people not wanting to go back to work for shit wages or for poor benefits or dangerous conditions, and they're just like abstaining from work. Those generally tend to be the people that aren't in unions, and the people who are in unions, you know, they're all going on strike. Like, this tweet is from about a week ago, and there's been more piled onto it since. On strike, 2,000 Buffalo hospital workers, 2,000 Washington carpenters, 1,000 Alabama miners, 700 Massachusetts nurses, 450 West Virginia steelworkers, 420 Kentucky whiskey workers. That's the big one right there. That's going to affect everyone. 350 Denver janitors. It was a one-day strike. 300 Los Angeles aerospace manufacturers, 200 Reno bus drivers, 100 Pennsylvania teachers, 75 symphony musicians, 50 West Virginia machinists. And then the potential strikers, some of this has already happened. The 65,000 film and TV workers, it's the IATSE, 37,000 Kaiser Permanente healthcare workers, 10,000 John Deere manufacturing workers. That's the latest shoe to drop. That happened, I believe, I want to say yesterday, but my grasp on time is tenuous at best. But the John Deere strikes are the latest ones to occur. Thousands of grad students at Harvard, Columbia, and Illinois State University, and 20,000 California State University faculty members, 2,000 telecom workers in California, 400 hospital workers in Oregon, 350 hospital workers in California, school bus drivers in Warwick, Rhode Island, Las Cruces, New Mexico, and Elk Grove, California. Like, shit's popping off out there right now, and I know a lot of people are frustrated about not being able to get certain things, or there's big delays on their shipments and all of that sort of stuff. You know, they can't go to a restaurant, you know, with the ease that they used to be able to pre-pandemic. And I know that I had a little bit of that frustration not too long ago. AEW Wrestling was in town. I went to watch their production. It was awesome. Had a great time. And afterwards, you know, I was starving and wanted to go to Kirby Lane here in Austin, and the one I went to, it was only like 10 o'clock at night, but they had closed, and I'm not used to that place closing so early. And, you know, it was because they don't have the staff to, you know, be a 24-hour operation the way that they used to be. So having to get used to that, you know, I wanted to carry it out and be all mad and indignant, but, you know, and that guy was like, "Oh, we're closed." I was just like, "Ah, that sucks." You know, that's just how it is right now, and it's going to be that way for the foreseeable future. And I am definitely on the side of anyone that wants to withhold their labor for, you know, better pay, better working conditions. It's necessary. Like, I totally understand where a lot of this is coming from. I mean, I was an advocate of it for quite some time. We've long since needed a general strike in general, and this is probably the closest we're ever going to get to a general strike, really. But, you know, after the housing crisis of 2008, you know, a lot of people lost a lot of jobs during that whole fiasco, and the recovery since during the Obama administration, you know, we gained jobs back, but those jobs paid a lot less than the ones that were lost from the housing crisis. And as a function of that, people who already were balancing on the razor's edge of savings had to dip into much of their savings, if not all of it, just to keep afloat during those times. And when you start, you get back from those economic situation to where you're working a shit wage job, you're not going to have the financial flexibility to rebuild your savings. So to the extent that you can save, you're probably not saving a lot, but a lot of Americans just weren't saving that much money at all. Everybody saw the news stories about record low savings from American workers, in the years leading up to COVID. And then COVID hit. And now, we're coming out of COVID, and there's this expectation that people are going to respond like after the housing crisis, where they're just going to be happy to get any kind of work in general. But, people depleted savings accounts. People, they don't want to live like that anymore. They don't want to bounce from crisis to crisis with just pennies in their account and hope that, in the next crisis, whatever government they have has the, decency and wherewithal to take care of them. The lack of late night eats in any place is bananas. When I was in Austin, there was only one Denny's left with a 24-hour service, and it was the smallest in town. Which Denny's? Do we have more than one Denny's in this city? I only know of the Denny's off of 35 near downtown. I don't know if there's any other Denny's in here, but if there is, I'm kind of shocked by that. Do we even have a Waffle House in this city? But yeah, once Denny's is hit, and once Waffle House is hit, something bad is going on. And yeah, and this is a city that, it's known for its late night eats. And some of the food trucks are still operable, all of your who's who food trucks that operate in the downtown vicinity are still largely, operating. Because, the bars and the clubs and stuff are operating at those hours as normal. So you're in that particular area, you're cool. But anything outside from that, like if you're not going dancing or drinking or something downtown, then living in Austin is just the same as living somewhere in the middle of Kansas. Everything just starts to shut down at around 9 o'clock. I don't blame people for not wanting to go to work at a Denny's or a Waffle House for $10, $12 an hour after having, survived, but having your finances completely ruined through a years-long pandemic, and B, big ass to get put right back on the front lines with people who, refuse to get vaccinated and refuse to wear masks and all that sort of stuff, while this virus is still out and about flying around everywhere. I mean, we're not out of this thing. I mean, people are still very much in danger of contracting a deadly virus. And as much as we may want to act like things are back to normal, like for a lot of people, they are as back to normal as they're gonna be for a little while at least. But people are still dying in droves out there. We still have a high body count from this thing, and it's still packing hospitals. The numbers in Austin are going down, and that's great. Like, we've been downgraded from stage 5 to stage 3 at this point, but we still have a lot of people in hospitals. So, and part of the as I read off in that tweet, like, nurses, hospital workers, they make up a huge contingent of people that are on strike, people that just don't want to work, in this environment anymore. And I can't blame those guys either. But let's take a quick peek at this video here.
The people now have the power, and they're using it. A wave of workers' strikes sweeping across America. Thousands across.
And honestly, by the way, I was very surprised. I forgot all about this dude, Shep Smith. I guess he was on Fox, and then he was too rational for them at some point, and he decided to bounce to CNBC. So I guess this is what he's up to now. Shepard Smith, located,
have already walked out, and even more are on the horizon. Here's some examples. Just today, we learned 60,000 Hollywood workers have set Monday as a strike deadline. Its union's been bargaining for months for a new contract with producers. A walkout would essentially bring Hollywood production to a standstill. 10,000 workers for John Deere in Iowa, Illinois, and Kansas say they're prepared to walk out as soon as midnight tonight. The company's having its most profitable year ever, but workers say they're being stiffed at the bargaining table. And just yesterday, healthcare workers at Kaiser Permanente overwhelmingly authorized a strike in California and Oregon. That's more than 24,000 nurses, pharmacists, midwives, and other employees citing staffing and safety concerns. Finally, workers at Kellogg are in their second week on the picket line. About 1,400 employees walked out at four series.
Don't cross those picket lines, folks, and support these strikes. Like, I was very close to buying some Pop-Tarts earlier, and then I was like, oh wait, I can't. It was a bummer, but I was very happy to not do it. So just be mindful. Always be mindful. There's a lot of strikes going on right now, so you got to keep up with who's out there picketing and making sure that you don't accidentally make a purchase that's detrimental to the cause. If you support the cause, and you should.
After their contract expired and they couldn't come to an agreement on a new one. Nationwide, the issues being negotiated vary widely from different industry to industry, but there's one constant. Workers want more money. Elena Samuels now, senior economics correspondent for Time. Elena, you wrote recently.
I'm sorry, quick aside. His eyelashes, he looks like the dude from Clockwork Orange. This is crazy. Were his eyelashes always this extreme? Maybe they were, but it's almost like he's cosplaying right now. Damn. Kind of creeping me out.
Now, senior economics correspondent.
He's got deep blue eyes.
Elena, you wrote recently that the workers realize it's the perfect time to go on strike. They've been wanting better deals for years and years, and all of a sudden they look in the mirror and the power is theirs.
That's right. I think, you've seen for 20 years or so, workers lose a lot of bargaining power. And finally, the economy is getting a little better. The unemployment rate is falling. There are a lot of job openings. And they're saying, you know what? I don't want to put up with this anymore.
Unions are popular with Americans now, more popular than they've been since the 1960s, statistically. Does that give them more bargaining power, or have those days passed?
Well, unions still represent a pretty small share of the workforce, but you see unions gaining a little bit of power over even workplaces that they don't organize. So, if unions are going to bring up...
I think unions represent only 10% of America's workforce right now. It's shockingly minuscule. But even though they represent only 10%, like, it's still very important that they are front and center in these battles, because they do... 10% is still a lot. 10% of the workforce is still a large contingent of people, and there's a lot of other industries that are affected by the things that happen within those unionized industries. But it also inspires other labor to organize and take collective action this way. So 10% of the workforce, yes, but it's not a 10% that should ever be overlooked.
Wages in one sector, maybe another hospital nearby will also have to bring up wages. So even though they aren't that big of a deal in a lot of workplaces now, they still have some power. And people are beginning to say, you know what, maybe those unions actually were right. Maybe we deserve a little bit more.
You wonder how long this can continue. I wonder if your reporting gives us an idea about how long someone who's not making enough money.
A perfect example of that actually would be this tweet right here. With 60,000 film workers set to go on strike Monday, many tell me they were inspired by mass retail worker walkouts. One IATSE member even mentioned how reading about the union busting at Amazon in Alabama, the Bessemer union effort there, provoked him to action. So this is like a textbook example of like labor solidarity and one organizational operation inspiring more. It's like a grassroots movement of labor uprising that's happening right now, basically.
Money at the local retail store can go, all right, I'll keep looking and I'll find more.
Well, I've talked to a lot of workers who either went on strike and then were fired or just quit, and they often were able to find jobs that paid more. And I think one thing we haven't talked about is there's a demographic change going on where a lot of baby boomers are retiring. So this could go on for a while. Well, workers are finding they have more power, and employers are really struggling to find the people that they want at the wages that they're willing to pay.
Elena Samuels from Time. It'll all work itself out. Thank you. Shepard Smith here. Thanks.
So, in these times, I'm also really curious to see if if any of this is going to have any kind of effect or influence on the ongoing efforts to unionize the video game industry. I still don't know what Game Workers Unite are up to over there. They haven't updated their Twitter in about a year. I know some of the people involved in that organization are doing interviews here and there, left and right, but whatever organizing is going on within the game industry, I'm not hearing anything of it from anybody really. So if ever there was a time that game industry unionization was going to catch fire and actually start to make waves and make steps towards making that a reality, if ever there was a time for that, that time would be right now. Like taking advantage of these strike waves and all of this this revitalized interest in unions going on right now in our workforce. If Game Workers Unite can't take advantage of that, then they're nothing. They're doomed. They're just smoke and mirrors. There's nothing going on there. 10,000 John Deere workers went on strike today. 60,000 IATSE members may be on strike by Monday. They will join the thousands of nurses, miners, hospital workers, factory workers, and others already on strike across America. Here we are in our long-awaited strike wave. What does this thrilling development tell the labor movement about what its future direction should be? Nothing. Let me phrase that in a more positive way. The current wave of aggressive strike actions across the country is one of the most politically inspiring things that has happened in years. But the fundamental thing that the labor movement needs to do remains exactly the same as it was last year and the year before that. We need to organize many, many more workers into unions. A strike wave and a growing labor movement is the seed of something big for society as a whole. A strike wave inside a shrinking labor movement is, for all of its charms, a taunt to everyone on the outside looking in. In a society defined by inequality and elitism, unions are in danger of becoming just another benefit for the lucky few. That's a very true point, and that's exactly what I mean by, like, if they can't grow the unionization effort, they can't use this interest and this intensity of the moment to grow the labor, the union efforts in the game industry, then there are no more chances beyond this. I don't think. I think if it dies here, it dies for good. And I guess their contention in this op-ed here is that stands to be true for unionization efforts in general, not, obviously not just within the game industry. The promise of power of these strikes with them, the promise and the power of these strikes carry with them the imperative for unions to grow. As long as union density continues to decline, as it has since the middle of the 20th century, strikes will remain a tool inaccessible to the vast majority of working people in America. The strike wave will be a bomb whose blast radius is tightly contained. Its full potential will never be unleashed unless we make it possible for everyone to embrace its lessons. Inspiring millions of workers to fight for better lives is great, but when only 10% of them have the tools necessary to get it done, that inspiration can quickly curl into cynicism and despair. That's why I said it's really important also to recognize that the people who aren't in strikes are exercising their collective power of labor by just not getting jobs, basically, by just sitting at home. Even though there's all these places that are like now hiring here, and here, competitive wages. And some of those places are actually, some of the more frontline places, restaurants and whatnot, they're starting to boost their pay to, $15 an hour here and there. And they're getting interest. And there's a famous story a few months back of the ice cream shop in Pennsylvania who, they had now hiring signs up and couldn't get anybody in the door. Then once they raised their starting wage to $15 an hour, they had lines of people, applying. It's a great example of, holding out for more money. And that's what it's going to take. And that's what, you can get if you do withhold your labor. Absent a union to help you organize and do that sort of stuff, then the only other way to flex your labor capability is to not work, to withhold your labor. And I see the labor shortages as basically non-union people doing what union people are doing right now. So as kind of cynical and maybe even finger waggy as this write-up appears to be, I think that it's kind of, maybe he mentions it later on in this piece, but so far they kind of miss that element of what's happening in our labor markets right now. The good news is that strikes and new organizing are naturally complementary. There is no better advertisement for the benefits of joining a union than a highly visible, successful strike that brings some high-handed employer to its knees. Yes, exactly. And right now, people want to see high-handed anybody's brought to their knees. If IATSE goes on strike, the entire film and television industry will come to a halt. That's pretty fucking impressive by any standard. Many Americans may not know much about unions, but they will know when their favorite TV shows go off the air due to the fact that the people who work on those shows are unwilling to continue eating shit. They will notice when all of their favorite celebrities come out in support of the strike because they know what's good for them in a widely unionized industry. That's already begun to happen. Strikes bring media coverage and attention in local communities to a tangible, direct demonstration of the power of organized labor. That is a rare and valuable thing. The strike wave will make many people want to have a union of their own. The question is whether the institutions of organized labor, big unions in the AFL-CIO, will make a plan to capitalize on this on a systematic way and fund the plan and execute the plan. Of that, we have no evidence yet. That is a very important point. Being able to capitalize on this moment, like I was saying with the game industry, is really the make or break of all of this. If there is no mass capitalization on this, if we can't start, seeing like, 50 to 100% increase in union developments across our labor markets, then all of this is pretty much for naught. I mean, it's great for the people who get something for it. If the Yahtzee workers end up getting what they want and the John Deere workers get what they want, then that's great for those guys, and that will have some effect on the areas within those people live in, because there'd be more people making more money. There'd be pumping more money back into the local economies. But as far as systematic changes, it would be pretty terrible if that's the only thing that comes of it. Let's see. What is the plan for mass organizing, and where is the money for it? These are the questions we need to answer I think you meant to form. These are the questions we need to answer to form the union world. We do not need a month of supportive tweets. We need several $100 million dedicated to new organizing to start. Yeah, who has $700 million to toss towards these efforts? Where's Mackenzie Bezos at? She's been tossing all sorts of money at left adjacent and sometimes outright progressive organizations and efforts. Maybe she can toss some of those ill-gotten Bezos bucks towards union organizing. I mean, if ever she wanted to get back at her shithead of an ex-husband, who, by the way, just took William Shatner to space. Like, I think I have a story about that on here, which I guess on one hand it's cool that the original captain finally got to at least dance amongst the stars a little bit. And reading some of his quotes, reading some of William Shatner's quotes about the experience, it's really kind of depressing because he's 90 years old. He's 90 years old, and he's one of the last surviving members of the original Star Trek cast, him and George Takei, who, for whatever reason, they just hate the living shit out of each other. But he was reflecting on what it was like to be up in space staring down at the world. It was very... I mean, what would you expect from a 90-year-old man? It was very existential, very... there was a lot of dread of death, and he's been pretty open about his fear of death in general, but there was a lot of that in his reflecting on his experiences going to space, and it was kind of moving, but also a little harrowing. And I mean, William Shatner's a weird dude. If you ever follow him on Twitter, he loves getting into fights over the shittiest things. He's a weird guy, but I'm at least still glad that he managed to get up there and have that experience. And I would wish that, anybody that was a part of Star Trek would have that experience. George Takei too. And I think Takei's comments about Shatner, he called him, what did he call him today? He called him an unworthy or unfit guinea pig. He called William Shatner an unfit guinea pig. And it's like, dude, just let it go, man. Let it go. I know you want to go to space too, but you gotta let it go. Anyways, that was a weird aside. Nobody predicted the strike wave, except for the people who constantly predict the strike wave every year, and they don't count. Well, it's kind of funny. There was actually this Michael Brooks show, rest in peace, Michael Brooks. He had a show about this about a year ago, Coming Strike Wave.
Demand they co-sponsor a version of Rashida's Boost Act. Ask them to make sure the DOJ indefinite detention does not go through. And on each state level in New York, you can call for a rent freeze with the GNRS bill. But every single state in the country should have comprehensive rent freeze legislation that then, of course, leads to other steps in terms of rent control and public housing. If this doesn't happen on a policy level, and in order to make it happen on a policy level, people need to take initiative and make power and do power. And the importance of labor can never be underestimated. Labor is key. There's no strategic way for the left without mass labor or mobilization, because that is the only mass area that the left has countervailing power to capital. That's not a moral judgment. That's a strategic reality. Let's go give a shout out to these amazing Purdue workers in Georgia. And this is happening across the country. People are walking off. Amazon factories have shut. From what I heard, I believe they shut down one, at least briefly, in Queens. People are walking off different jobs. It's dangerous. And do not listen to any of these motherfuckers who tell you to go back to work in this environment. Obviously, if you absolutely have to, you probably already are. Many Americans are in that situation. They're terrorized by the economy. We need to fight. The question is not allowing Donald Trump to seize the terrain of people.
That's the really key part, the idea that people are being like terrorized by the economy. If you remember, it was in August, I believe. It was much earlier than that here in Texas, but that was when the unemployment benefits, the unemployment extension expired. They let it lapse because they wanted to use that as incentive to get people back to work. And in Texas, obviously, Greg Abbott, back in July, I believe, he started peeling back on unemployment benefits to the extent that he could to quote unquote incentivize people to get back to work. But that's coercion. That's a threat of violence against people in order to force them to participate in a labor market that is nightmarishly exploitive of them, on top of just being dangerous. And that's, people need to recognize that those are acts of violence being committed to working people by the state. And, you should respond appropriately to that. And I think that's what these strike waves really are all about. It's about people that are fed up, basically, with, being held hostage, having their livelihoods held hostage, just to make, and you saw it throughout the entirety of the pandemic of, billionaires making more money, and who's the richest billionaire now. This week it's Jeff Bezos, next week it's Elon Musk, and then it's Jeff Bezos, and then it's Musk again. It's back and forth, and we're just making so many more billions of dollars. And in the meantime, like, we're told that we just don't have enough money to do, basic supply to provide people with even basic services. And the funny thing about that, of course, obviously there's like a million different ways in which we can prove that the money exists, whether you want to look at like the Pentagon budget or you want to look at, what we spend, on tax cuts and tax breaks and handouts to companies and the PPP loans and all that sort of stuff. Like, there are a million different ways you can talk about, how we spend our money. But in the particular instance of something like, say, single payer healthcare, Medicare for all, you hear a lot of people talking about how, the administrative efforts of it would be a boondoggle, and that would be expensive, and, people wouldn't have choice, and people like their doctors and all that stupid bullshit. But the irony of the moment right now is that if you look at our pandemic response with respects to how we do the vaccine rollout. If you went and got a vaccine shot, you experienced single-payer healthcare because you didn't go through your insurance company to do that. You didn't have to haggle with your insurance company to see if you were covered under it. You didn't have to do a copay. You didn't have to pay it towards your deductible or anything like that. You didn't have to find a doctor that was in your network who could administer the shot to you. It was none of that shit. All you did was you showed up at where they had it, and they gave you the shot, and then you walked away. You didn't pay a penny. You didn't have to do anything because the federal government paid for all those shots. The federal government paid for it. They were the single payer, and then they administered it through a variety of different healthcare networks. Some of it, going through Medicare. Some of it going through. They did use health insurance companies to help administer it, but it was still the government that paid for it. It was single payer. We all benefited. Well, those of us that got the vaccine shot. But even those who were subsequently protected by those of us who got the vaccine shot, we all benefited from single-payer healthcare in that regard. So we have a functioning, demonstrable example of how we institute that in our country right now, and it's functioning. It's not breaking anything down. So yeah, like that, and that's another thing that a lot of these strike waves need to start calling for. Like I would like to see organization around all of these different union efforts that are striking around not just getting stuff for themselves within their industry, within their workplace, but getting stuff as much to the extent that they can, making demands of public policy as well. I think maybe that's one thing that a very large strike effort combined with a very large labor withholdment effort can probably coordinate and organize behind actually doing, if there was an effort to really coordinate and organize it. Right now, it just seems like it's a bunch of different things that are all popping up at once that are inspired by one another. There is no real cohesive, coordinated effort amongst all of them. So whether something like that will develop in the future, time will tell. I hope so, because I want them to get more than just a couple of treats for their individual workplaces. I think this is an opportunity where we can use that to demand radical restructures of our society. So those are just some minor thoughts on the strike wave. Hey guys, thanks for watching this video. If you liked what I said, what Justin said, if you like the content we're providing, if you had any kind of laughs at all, even if you hate us, if you hate my guts, if you want to stab me, if you want to say all sorts of horrible things to me, cool. Like the video, subscribe. You'll get fed all sorts of shit you'll probably hate. And if you like us, you'll get fed all sorts of shit you probably like. So please and thank you.